Dobrobajalowitz. That is the word of the day. That is actually welcome in Russia, in Russian. And I am actually working on my Russian. I have been for some time in Duolingo, actually coming right along with it. Got a long way to go. But someday I will be visiting Russia. And I don't know how soon that will be. Obviously, we're going to wait till things get cleaned up there and it's actually safe to go. But I will continue to work on my Russian. So Dobrobajalowitz to you all here tonight. So tonight is Family History Night. We're going to jump into some more of the Nis Thomas Hansen family history. We're going to talk about these 8 children that lived. They lost 2 sets of twins. So when they were very young, and so we won't be trying to talk about them, but we'll talk about the other 8. I did want to touch on a few other things here quickly at first. We were talking about the story of Joseph in Egypt in this past week in our scripture study, and today during Sunday school, it was a primary topic. And one of the things and it's interesting to get some new perspective on things, and I had never thought of it this way, but one of the perspectives about the story of Joseph was, what if the Lord had delivered him too early? What if he had not allowed Joseph to, Joseph first of all got thrown into a pit, and I'm sure when he was down in that pit that he thought, sometime before the end of the day, my brothers are probably going to come to their senses and get me out of this pit, and I'm going to be home sleeping on my own bed tonight. But that's not how that situation worked out at all. They actually pulled him out of the pit, and instead of killing him, they decided to sell him into slavery. But then once, so pretty bad situation. He's on his way to he doesn't even know where. He ends up in Egypt, gets sold into Potiphar's house. And there in Potiphar's house, he's a slave, but this is a pretty nice house. And I'm sure he has a pretty decent place to sleep and some pretty decent food and a pretty decent experience, I would imagine. Um, but then the whole Potiphar's wife thing happens, and next thing you know, now he's in prison. So now he's got his third thing going on there that was a pretty rough negative thing to deal with. And it's there in prison that he interprets some dreams for the baker and the butler. And then eventually, over a period of time, he ends up interpreting Pharaoh's dreams, and then he ends up second in command of Egypt. So that's a quick little snapshot, but we think it would seem to be that took place over about 12 to 13 years, based on what we can understand of the story and kind of the timeline, that was about 12 to 13 years that Joseph had to suffer through some really difficult things. But through it all, we know that the Lord was with him. The Lord was with him through that entire time. In fact, when I sat down in there today, there were scripture references on the seats, and I just sat down in some random seat. There were some soft seats up front, so I thought I'll sit up front here and Heidi can sit beside me in these soft seats. And I picked up a scripture from, without realizing what it said, I sat down on where a scripture was Genesis 26:24, and the reference from that scripture was, "Fear not, for I am with thee, and will bless thee." And I thought, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear. I needed to hear that message. But then what was interesting is there was about 20 other scripture references spread throughout the room that other people read, and they were basically all the same theme. So it wouldn't have mattered where I sat. I was going to get the same message. And that is much like with Joseph, is that when we are true and faithful to the things that we know are right, then we can trust that the Lord is with us. And I have certainly felt that these last 8 months, as I have felt my life heal and change in really quite amazing and miraculous ways. But sometimes I might scratch my head and wonder why did this take 42 years for me to why did this take 42 years for me to find this information and to find this this protocol, if you will, that has allowed me to really take control of my metabolism, to understand insulin and metabolic dysfunction in a way now that I feel in control of my health and specifically my gut health in a way that I never have before. Where was this information? Where was this doctor, or where was this anyone who could have helped me or helped my mother or helped my father? Who now I lost my mom when she was 58 years old, and that was back in August of 1998. So that is 28 years ago now. But my dad, who is 88 years old, I think that's right, 37. But 88 years old, he is in very good health, but mentally he has dementia and the onset of Alzheimer's. And one of the things that we've come to learn and come to find out that those two diseases stem directly from and are related to metabolic dysfunction and insulin resistance, and are starting to be called in some circles diabetes 3 or type 3 diabetes. And they found that the brain is simply not made to operate on glucose all the time. And one of the ways to keep yourself from getting dementia and Alzheimer's is to make sure that you are not running your brain on glucose all the time, but you're giving your brain a break from glucose. And there's no better way to do that than intermittent fasting and forcing your brain to to run on fats in your body instead of running glucose all the time. And you can, by doing that, you can do a lot to ensure that you don't deal with dementia and Alzheimer's. And you may also be able to save a parent, possibly from going down that path, or if they are down that path to some degree, you may be able to reverse, or at least arrest and possibly even reverse that issue to some degree in their life. And I think those principles and those concepts make a lot of sense to me. And I would encourage anybody who's dealing with somebody who is the on the onset of dementia to understand these principles of insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction, and get this person on a program of intermittent fasting and see if you can reverse that issue in their life. So that's enough on that topic, but I feel very passionate about that. And I truly, as soon as I say that's enough, I jump right back into it. I truly believe that had my mother knew and understood the things that I now know and understand, and had she had appropriate and reasonable tools to deal with her metabolic dysfunction, that her mental illness could have likely been completely resolved and never even encountered. I truly believe that based on the experience and the education that I've received here in the last 8 months. And I'm going to hold my ground on that one, and I'm going to hold it pretty firmly. So, if anybody wants to talk to me about that, they're welcome to. But that's how I feel that about that pretty strongly. One of the things I love about this effort that I'm making here on my show here, We'll Sing and We'll Shout. This is episode 33. One of the things I'll say about this is I really don't have that many people who are followers, and and I don't have. I'm actually going to pull this up on Facebook on the big screen here in front of me so I can make sure that I understand what's going on. Uh, I kind of enjoy right now how pathetic this is. Okay, so I'm up. That looks good. I kind of enjoy the fact that I have very few followers, other than my amazing sister, who's always with me every night, and a few other people. And maybe there's others that are following that I'm not even aware of, and I always appreciate that. But the whole situation, let's be honest, it's pretty pathetic. It really is. It really is pretty pathetic. I mean, if the goal is to have 100 and 1,000 and 1 million followers someday, we're in a pretty pathetic situation here. But the thing that I would say about that is I am familiar with this path of being pathetic. I am familiar with starting out in a really bad place and moving to a really good place. And and I might just look way back in my early youth and say, when I first started, three examples. When I first started riding the tractor with Grandpa, I had no idea what we were doing and what was going on and what any of these levers and steering wheel and the whole deal, how that all worked. But I got that figured out in a pretty reasonable amount of time. The next thing I knew, I was driving the tractor with Grandpa all the time. He would let me pretty much run the whole thing to some extent. And I learned that tractor inside and out. And between Grandpa's legs there on the 656, I felt in complete control and in complete command of that situation. And then the amazing day came when I was only 6 years old. I was about 6 3/4 years old. I was moving towards 7. But the day came, and I've already shared this story, so we're not going to go down this whole road here. But the day came when I got to drive the tractor myself. When Grandpa needed me to drive the tractor myself so that he could stack the hay on the hay wagon. And that was a much different feeling when I was sitting there in that tractor seat by myself. And even though I questioned my abilities, my grandpa didn't seem to question my abilities at all. He knew that I had the skills to do that, and that it was just a matter of building some confidence in me. And what do you know? He was right. I actually could do that, and I did do that that day, and it was amazing thing, an amazing feeling. And then what happened is for the next 3 summers, I got to do that almost constantly, which was sit on that tractor and bale hay. And what I once thought was going to be the neatest, funnest, coolest thing in the world, all of a sudden wasn't quite as neat as and fun as cool. Now, another example was my kickball experience there at Thompson School, where I was really quite pathetic at catching the kickball. But over a period of a few weeks, I taught myself how to catch the kickball by throwing the kickball up against the greenery. And I worked at that and worked at that. And at first, it didn't really maybe seem like I was making a lot of progress. But and then one day I came home from school and I really worked at it and put in over an hour trying to make sure that I could catch that freaking kickball every time it would come at me. And the very next day at school, I caught the kickball twice on the mound and picked it up and threw another person out and got all 3 outs. And from that day forward, I never once again had to question my abilities on the kickball field. My third example would be my place kicking adventure. When I started playing a lot of football with my younger brothers at home, we had a football field right there between Dad's farm office and between the house. It was about 15 yards wide. I think that's fair, and about 30 yards long. And we would play football out there, and we would always play from the west to the east. So the east end was always the end zone, and and we would score touchdowns. But one of the things that I could tell was missing right away was the extra point, and we needed to have the whole experience. And so I put up a goalpost, and I started learning to kick the Nerf ball through the goalpost. And the goalpost was about 10 feet wide, and the crossbar was about 6 feet above the ground. And I built that thing with some wood I found around the barn. There's some 2x4s and whatever. Drove some fence posts in the ground and attached that goalpost to the fence post. And it was an H style goalpost. And I started to learn how to kick that kickball, or I'm sorry, that Nerf ball, that Nerf football through the goalpost from about 5 yards out. And when I know that when I first started doing that, I can remember when I first started doing that, that kickball was going, or that Nerf ball was going all over the place. That Nerf ball being a spongy ball, it took a lot of practice to learn how to kick that spongy ball through those uprights. But I did learn how to do that. And then once I learned how to do it from 5 yards out, pretty soon I moved it from 5 yards to 10 yards and on back to 20 yards. And as I grew and my skills grew, I could kick that Nerf ball in from 25, 30 yards out. Not necessarily every time, but I could. And then I started using a real football, and then I had to move back up closer again because that real ball was heavier, it was harder. But the one thing about the real football is you could be more accurate. You could be more accurate with the real football, with the real leather football. And as I started to build up those skills, then I could start to move back, and my kicking improved. And then eventually I took it up in the haymow and I built a box out of straw, and I would kick the football into the box, 100, 200 times, not necessarily every day, but I would do this. I would practice quite a bit. And then when I spent that summer of 1983 down in Columbus, I practiced even a lot more. And I got to the point where on one day, with a little bit of help from the wind, I kicked the ball off the tee from the 50-yard line on a 3-step drop, just a normal 3-step soccer style place kick into the ball, and I kicked that thing through the uprights. So, and then I had that day out in Rexburg, Idaho at Pioneer Park when I had this kickoff against the other kid, and I won. I won that kickoff quite easily. Kickoff being that we were challenging each other in place kicking, and I earned my spot on the team there that I never got to play because I couldn't get eligible. But my point is that that I've seen the process of going from completely pathetic to completely capable. And I didn't continue on with my place kicking skills, and it's somewhat maybe unfortunate, but life went different directions, and that's okay. But I did have that experience of going from completely pathetic to completely capable, and I understand that path, and I'm not at all afraid of it here. So I guess I just wanted to throw that out. We're going to jump in here to where we left off. Got 16 minutes into it just for a little warm up there. And we're going to talk about these children of the Nis Thomas Hansen family. And I think Sister Cheryl is ready to go here. So there we go. And my sister loves me, which I already knew that, but thank you. Appreciate that thought. So here we go. So this is Nora speaking. Nora is the oldest daughter of John Hansen, and John Hansen is one of the siblings that we're going to talk about now. So Nora is talking about her uncle Charles. So Nora says this. She says, first was Carson Niss, or who they called Charles when he came to the United States. He was nearly 12 years old when they came to the United States. He doubtless remembered many things regarding his homeland. If only we had contacted him while he was living. My friends, we got to stop there and focus on that comment for a moment. If only we had contacted him while he was living. This is Nora speaking back in 1976. This is 50 years ago, and Nora is saying, hey, man, I wish we had talked to this older member of our family while he was still alive. If that is where you are at, I would encourage you to talk to the older members of your family while they are still alive, so you don't find yourself where Nora is saying, gee, I wish we had talked to him because he could have told us all about Denmark. And I wish Nora could have talked to him because she could have told us all about Denmark. So Nora goes on. She says, as I remember him, he was always a fun-loving person looking for excitement and adventure. He had little desire to pile up the material things in life. He just made the most of what he had. As a young man, he loved nice, sporty clothes. His greatest desire seemed to be to have a fancy buggy with a fast young horse. Now, I know that that's like a lot of youth today. A lot of youth today want a fancy buggy with a fast young horse. His favorite sport, let's make sure we're going the right direction here. His favorite sport, what happened to his favorite sport? His favorite sport was to pull up beside the other drivers and challenge them to a race. Can you imagine that? The girl Celeste Wilker, Weikeer, Wilker, who later became his wife, shared his love for fun and excitement. They had 8 children. That's Charles and Celeste. They had 8 children. The oldest, Earl, died of scarlet fever when a young boy, and a girl died as a baby. The other 6 all grew to adulthood. Now, there are grandchildren of this situation out there, and it really would be amazing to track down some of these grandchildren and let them share some stories about their grandpa Charles. The other 6 all grew to adulthood. Uncle Charlie, as I knew him, was very friendly and lots of fun to be around. For many years, they lived on farms which they rented. At first, they rented farms near Bellevue, Ohio. Later, they lived near Attica and Bloomville. I think after Bloomville, they gave up farming, might have been a good choice, and moved to Sandusky, where they went into other kinds of work with both of them working. They still loved fun and excitement and spent many happy days at Cedar Point on weekends until Uncle Charlie developed cancer. Aunt Lesty, now this must have been Celeste, Aunt Lesty continued to work to try to pay their high doctor bills while Uncle Charlie kept busy by making rugs, etc., to pass the time away. Second in line was Matta Margaret. And I'll just note this. So Nora has a younger sister named Margaret, but we are talking about John Hansen's sister, Matta Margaret. Let's grab the picture here. And point this out here. So we just got done talking about this fine. Let me make sure I do this right here. We got Ton talking about this fine looking fella here named Charles. And now we're talking about Matta, and Matta is second right here. So now we're talking about Matta Market. She's over here, standing here by Harry. And so that's Matta. So Matta was 8 years old when she came to the United States. Sorry for the little nose scratch there. She was truly the big sister and little mother to all the younger members of the family. She dropped out of school at a very, very early age, but was an excellent cook, baker, and baby nurse. She was loved by all and only seemed to want to help and care for others. She was married when she was 20 years old and had a family of 5 boys and 1 girl. They spent their entire life on a farm south of Clyde. Isn't that amazing? She loved her family and waited on them her entire lifetime. Now, here's the sad part. Matta died as the result of burns caused by her clothes catching on fire while trying to dry bedding over an electric heater. She ran outside to try to get help. A neighbor saw her and ran to help, but it was too late. She and all her family were lifelong members of the Lutheran Church in Clyde. So that's what we have about Meta Market is essentially 2 paragraphs, and and that's and this was an amazing person, and that's so unfortunate. I mean, we learned a lot there about Meta, but it's really unfortunate that we don't have so much more because I'm sure we could have a book about her if somebody had taken time to write it. So now we go third in line. Third in line was our father, and this is my great grandfather. Our father loused Jens or John. He was past 6 years of age when he came to the United States. He had very vague memories of his home in Schleswig and of the boat trip coming to the US. After reaching the US, the family was destitute. And if we recall, we noted earlier that Nis Thomas Hansen, when he got to the United States, had 50 cents in his pocket. Now, 50 cents went a little further back in 1882 than it does today, but it didn't go that far. So an uncle and aunt in Port Clinton kept Dad with them for 6 years. They were good to him, but he was a very serious-minded and sensitive person. He missed the love and affection of his own family, so always seemed to crave affection. He was taken home to help on the farm when he was 12 years old, and his older brother had left home to work for others, that being Charles. As soon as Uncle Harry was old enough to help at home, Dad went out to work for other farmers as a hired man in the summer months. Then he would cut wood for different farmers in the winter months. While his education was very limited, he learned to handle money and was always strictly honest and prompt in handling business affairs. He loved animals and was always considered an outstanding judge of animals. He took very good care of them and was known for his ability to train horses. Nearly every winter, a horse dealer in Bellevue would have a train car load of wild horses shipped in from the western plains and auction them off. Dad frequently would purchase a team of them. I remember so well going, and again, this is Nora speaking, oldest daughter to John, who we're talking about now. I remember so well going with Dad to the pasture field in the early morning. We would take fresh carrots or quartered apples or lumps of brown sugar in our hands to coax the horses to us. At first, they were wild, very wild, and afraid of us. While they nibbled on the tidbits, Dad would slip a bridle over their heads. After training the horses and using them for farm work, Dad would sell them at a much higher price. We never owned a saddle, but Dad tried to teach all of us to ride horseback, to ride horse, to ride horse bareback. That makes a lot more sense, huh? We raised many horses from colts. Many of them were descendants of Topsy, the horse that Mother owned when they were married. These colts were loved and cared for as many people love their dogs. Dad always measured time by the age of the various colts. He could always tell what happened the year that Fan was 2 or 3 years old, etc. Fanny, who was a beautiful gray or white mare, was the favorite. She, like her mother Topsy, spent their entire lifetime at our home. Both had the habit of always standing up to sleep. Both died of old age and were buried at Greyhaven Farm. Walter Rarick brought white ash trees from Gibsonburg, which were planted as a memorial for old Fan. Now, Cheryl, if you remember, there were, I'm pretty sure that the white ash trees they're talking about there were the five, I think it was just five or six white ash trees that were right along the west side of the lane, just west of the orchard. And I think those are the ash trees that they're talking about there that were there when we were growing up. Dad also took great pride in his prized Guernsey dairy cattle and Poland China hogs. He didn't have large flocks of sheep, but he could identify each individual ewe and their lambs. He loved his children and wanted the best for them. He romped with us very often on the floor, in the haymow, or in the yard. He was the one who taught us our table and bedtime prayers. He enjoyed tucking us in bed and listening to our prayers. He was almost always the one to take the children in the bobsled to other schools for visits and spell downs. Pretty exciting times jumping in the buggy with the horse and going to a spell down at the other schools. So he always had the liveliest and fastest horses and had strings of sleigh bells on their harnesses to add to the enjoyment of the sleigh ride. Many times when the weather was bad, Dad would all pick up all the kiddies to take them home from school. Often the water would freeze over in the sinkhole, and the children would all gather there to skate or coast. And Cheryl, what they're referring to there, the pond there behind what is now the Fox property, or on the Fox property, that pond was once the sinkhole. And it was when Dad was in FFA that he did a project of turning that sinkhole into the pond. So they're talking about going down and skating on what is now the pond back there. Often the water would freeze over in the sinkhole and the children would all gather. We talked about Dad. Dad was often there to play with us and to see that no one fell in or got hurt. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Let's not fall in the sinkhole. Um, Dad loved to whistle and sing. Do you remember when I represented school with HIV? Let me answer Cheryl here. I do remember that. I beat all the girls in my school. This was my strong band. I do remember that, and I remember Dad setting up kind of a long jump thing there on the farm, and I was kind of doing some of it too. But I had long forgotten that, but I do remember you doing the long jump there for sure. And one of the things we learned here, Cheryl, about Nis Thomas Hansen, our great great grandfather, was that he was a high jumper and apparently a pretty skilled high jumper there in the Danish army, and they would jump over wooden horses. So not at all surprised that you have jumping ability in your legs there. And oh, I didn't realize Lainey was on the sideline there with you, but I do remember that you were there at that kickoff there at Madison High School. Okay, so catching you got to stay on top of things with the sister there for sure. Uh, Often, okay, so the water froze over. He would always whistle as we went to the pasture field in the early morning and bring the horses and cattle to the barn. He also liked to whistle while he would turn the cream separator. Mother, talking about, let's see, who are we talking about here? Mother, oh, we're talking about, so Nora's kind of jumping because she's supposed to be talking about just the kids of Miss Thomas Hanson, but now she's talking about her mom, Clara Jane Zimmerman. And that's okay. Mother was an exceptionally good mathematician. She loved her Ray's Higher Arithmetic and Park's Grammar book, and I actually looked these up on Amazon, and these books are both out there and available. Ray's Higher Arithmetic and Park's Grammar book, and used them as measuring sticks as a rule in judging other people. Isn't that interesting? Since Dad had so little formal education, Mother took over the managing of the family finances. She liked that role and didn't relegate enough of it to Dad. when she had a paralytic stroke at age 55, something that likely could have been um, resolved by understanding her metabolic dysfunction. But when she had that stroke at age 55 and dad was suddenly forced to take over the shopping, etc., he found it very difficult. Losing her role as manager, mother was so disappointed she didn't really try to adjust to other interests. She just retired into a shell, talking very little or paying little attention to anything. She drank very little water, so developed kidney trouble, which caused her death. Dad died of malnutrition and grief after mother's death. They both were members of the evangelical and Reformed Church at Fireside. Both spent the last few weeks of their lives with us at the Rarick home in Toledo. So that's interesting. Nora had both her parents up there with her in Toledo at their home the last few lives, the last few weeks of their life. Sure, we also touched on this in that the Nis Thomas Hansen family and most of those children were members of the Lutheran Church there in Bellevue. And for some reason, John and Clara Jane chose to go to the church at Fireside. Now, there could be a couple different reasons for that, and one of which is that their kids were now going to school down at Thompson. The Thompson Centralized School, I think, is what it started to be called when it first got set up. And they may have just decided, you know what, we go to school down here. Why don't we just join these people and go to church down there? That could be one possible explanation. The other explanation is the one that you and I were hypothesizing the other day, in that she didn't like going to the Lutheran church on Bellevue because she didn't feel like she could compete with her sister-in-laws in regards to outfits and hats. And so she said, John, we're not playing this game anymore. We're going down to church here in Fireside. So don't really know for sure. A couple possibilities there. But whatever it was, they went to church at Fireside, and then that's where my grandparents went to church, and that's where my dad and siblings went to church. And then when I spent some early years with grandma, I would go to church down there with her at Fireside. And the one thing I remember about that experience of going to church down at Fireside, it seemed like we would sing "God be with you till we meet again" about every other week. It probably wasn't that often, but it certainly felt that way. And whenever that song, we sing that same song in our Latter-day Saint congregations at times, and whenever we sing that song, I will feel like I'm sitting there beside grandma down there at the Fireside Church, because that's where that song takes me, is back there to the pew with grandma. So so next came Mary. So let's pop on the picture here again. We just got done talking about this dapper looking fellow right here, John Hansen, who is my great grandfather. And now we're going to talk about Mary. And Mary is this gal right here. So let's talk about Mary. And just as a note, so Charles, and then Matta, and then John, and then Mary. These were the four that came over from Denmark with them on the boat sometime around 1882-ish. John was 6, he was 12, she was about 8, and I think she was about 4. So that's what we've got going on there. We'll visit that picture again here in a little bit. Mary came next in line, 2 years younger than Dad. So yes, she was 2 years younger than Dad to the day. They shared a birthday. So she was 4 years old. She too quit school at an early age. Apparently that was something that the young women did back in the day. And if young women had that option today, I bet there would be a lot more of that. But fortunately, they don't have that option. They stay in school, which is obviously a good thing, coming from a guy who missed about 30 days of high school per year. Okay, so she worked away from home doing some housework, but chiefly doing babysitting by the week or the month. So Mary was doing a lot of housework and a lot of babysitting, and that's exactly what happens when you drop out of school. She was married to Henry Zimmerman. So Cheryl, this is some interesting history here. She was married to Henry Zimmerman, and of course there were other Zimmermans around Bellevue, and some of those Zimmermans would bring grain to the farm, to Dad's grain business there. And I believe that those Zimmermans were ones that we were related to. So she notes that Mary, they had no children of their own, so they adopted a baby girl. they named her Helen. This is kind of funny. They really tried to do too much for her, giving her far too much candy and sweets. As a result, she had very poor teeth. She was never very well, so she cried and whined so much that we called her Cranky Helen. She died of the flu in 1918. So that's really nice. Calling your cousin, is that right? Yeah, calling your cousin Cranky Helen. Oh no, here comes Cranky Helen. Um, but apparently, life caught up with Cranky Helen, and she died of the flu in 1918. I just had the flu here last week. Fortunately, I didn't. Fortunately, it wasn't going to kill me. So, but here's the interesting part. Uncle Henry, this is Mary's husband. Uncle Henry was the fire chief in Bellevue for many years, and they were both very active members and very partial to the Lutheran Church. So Henry and Mary were members of the Lutheran Church there in Bellevue throughout their entire life. Hans Peter Harry was only about 6 weeks old when he came to the United States. He was always a very serious-minded and industrious person. He was very thoughtful of his parents and helped them in every way he could. He also frequently helped our father on the farm. He liked to tease me and play with me. He always called me Peaches. He worked many years on the Nickel Plate Railroad, most of the time as an engineer, where he became very widely known. He saved his money wisely, so had purchased a lot and built a fine house on it before he was married and had it clear of debt. Now, that's the way to get married there, is to save your money, buy your lot, build your house, and have it all paid off before you got married. That is not the way I approached marriage. He always had a very high sense of morality, honesty, and decency, and found it difficult to excuse the lack of it in others. He married Lillian Lewis, a girl from Lorraine. He always wanted to give both her and their 3 children the best of everything. They too were members of the Lutheran Church in Bellevue. So, so this is Uncle. This is Hans Peter, or what was known as Harry once they got to the United States. And he's the dapper fellow that bought the lot and built a very fine house. I would be interested, they don't say this, but I can assume that they purchased a lot and built a house, a very fine house, right there in Bellevue, because that's where he was working and that's where they were going to church. So sure, it would be really interesting to do some research and know which one of these houses in Bellevue was it that Harry, Hans Peter, which house is it that he built? That information is out there. So there's a little challenge for you if you want to take a homework assignment. We are almost 40 minutes into this, and I've still got 3 kids to go. And the 3 kids that we have to go are Anna and Adeline. So Anna, we need to talk about Anna, and then we need to talk about Adeline Elizabeth, and then we need to come talk about Jenny Roslyn. And I think what we want to do is hold off on those 3 until next week, because like I said, we're 40 minutes into but really a lot of amazing information here. And it would be so fun to learn more about these people. And we could likely do that if we could track down some of their descendants who are still alive and probably could share a lot of good memories about what these people were like. I think we could probably find those people out there, Cheryl. So we need to talk about that and think about how we might go about that so we can gather some of these stories. I don't know that I have a lot of other wrap-up thoughts. I hope that the other members of my family really enjoyed these stories here tonight. This information is all available online. I just enjoy sharing it and reading it and thinking through it, and sometimes just hearing it verbalized brings more meaning to it than when it just sits in a file somewhere. So thank you all for joining Family History Night, and we will be on tomorrow night, Monday night, with is this our 3rd or 4th installment? I think maybe it's our 4th installment. Yes, it is our 4th installment of the Cheryl's Boyfriend Countdown Calendar. Now, we still haven't actually seen that actual countdown calendar, Cheryl, so So that's one of the things you need to do too, is get that countdown calendar put together, because everybody wants to see that, so we can count down as we go here. But tomorrow night, the Cheryl's Boyfriend Countdown Calendar, 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 10 p.m. for Cheryl. And we will look forward to some really great stories tomorrow night. Like, I know who this is. I know what's coming, and it's good stuff. So you guys are all going to want to tune in for that. That's going to be amazing. And we will look forward to catching you all then. Take care.